Every adventure film, especially every spy film, has its collection of remarkable villains, and Spies Like Us is no exception. Steve Forrest and Bruce Davison give as good as they get.
In 1979, Steve Forrest turned down $1.2 million for a single role after SWAT. His agent thought he was crazy. His wife was furious. But nobody knew the terrifying truth. Panic attacks on set, death threats from the FBI, and a family crisis that pushed him to the edge. From secret therapy sessions to his shocking new life as a beekeeper, this is the story Hollywood tried to hide for 40 years. Steve Forrest was born William Forrest Andrews on September 29, 1925, in Huntsville, Texas. He was the 12th of 13 children in a big, busy family. His parents, Charles Forrest Andrews and Annis Speed Andrews, worked hard to support everyone. Life in a household with so many siblings was noisy and full of activity. The children had to keep themselves entertained, and they often told stories or put on little performances. Steve, being one of the youngest, loved watching his older siblings. This planted the first seeds of his love for acting. The large family also taught him how to work hard, as money and resources were always tight. Surprisingly, out of all 13 children, only Steve and his older brother Dana Andrews became famous in Hollywood. The rest of their siblings lived quiet, ordinary lives. This difference between their paths was both a source of pride and a little tension in the family. Dana Andrews, Steve's older brother, was already a big Hollywood star when Steve was young. Dana was born 16 years earlier, in 1909, so he seemed more like a distant figure than a close sibling. Steve admitted that he didn't want to follow Dana's path at first, because he worried people would only see him as Dana's little brother. This caused some distance between them for a while. Steve even joined the Army during World War II, partly to build his own identity. But in 1950, Dana recognized that Steve had real talent. He used his Hollywood connections to help Steve get his first big movie role in So Big, 1953. This moment changed everything, and the two brothers grew closer after that. Even though they worked in the same industry, they only acted together once in a 1969 episode of The Big Valley. Critics loved their chemistry, and it became a highlight of the show. Steve and Dana's father, Charles Forrest Andrews, had a strong influence on them, even though he wasn't an actor. Charles was a Baptist minister known for his powerful sermons. He could hold an audience's attention like no one else, and this inspired both his sons. Steve once said that watching his father preach was like watching the best actor he'd ever seen. At first, Charles wasn't happy about Dana and Steve going into Hollywood. He thought it was a sinful place. But over time, he became proud of them. In fact, he even visited a movie set in 1943 to watch Dana film a scene. This visit moved him so much that he changed his mind about acting. Later, Charles even appeared as an extra in one of Steve's films, just for fun. His support meant a lot to both Dana and Steve, and his commanding style influenced their acting careers in many ways. Steve's childhood in Huntsville, Texas, was shaped by the Great Depression. While times were hard for most people, his family managed to stay stable thanks to his father's work as a minister. This gave Steve the freedom to explore the town and its surroundings. He loved the open landscapes, which later influenced his performances in Western films. One unforgettable moment from his childhood was witnessing the last public execution in Texas, when he was just 9 years old. The event, which drew a massive crowd, left a deep mark on him. It gave him an early understanding of justice and morality, which he used in his acting. Another surprising moment came when Steve was 7 years old. The infamous outlaw Clyde Barrow, of Bonnie and Clyde fame, reportedly attended a church service led by Steve's father. Steve even shook hands with him, something he described as thrilling and strange. These experiences gave Steve a unique perspective on life, which later helped him bring depth to his characters. Steve Forrest's life took him on an incredible journey. At 18, he joined the U.S. Army during World War II, ready to face the dangers of war. He ended up in the 4th Infantry Division and landed on Utah Beach during the D-Day invasion in 1944. It was chaos everywhere, but Steve stayed brave and helped secure the beach while facing heavy enemy fire. His commanding officer even praised him for his courage. Later, he was part of the liberation of Paris, where a grateful woman hugged him and cried, thanking him for helping free her city. That moment stayed with him forever. Steve's leadership came naturally. Even as a teenager, he stood out for his calmness and confidence. By 19, he was promoted to sergeant, which was rare for someone so young. But the hardest part came during the Battle of the Bulge, one of the war's toughest fights. It was freezing cold, supplies were low, and the Germans were attacking non-stop. Steve led his men in dangerous missions, even going behind enemy lines on Christmas Eve to gather information that saved lives. He earned a Bronze Star for his bravery. By the end of the war, he was a staff sergeant at just 20 years old, an impressive feat that showed his strength and determination. After the war, Steve wasn't sure what to do next. In 1946, he visited his brother Dana Andrews, a Hollywood actor, just to see what his life was like. Dana was filming a big movie, and Steve got to visit the set. That's when he met director William Wyler, who told him he should think about acting. At first, Steve didn't take it seriously. He wanted a steady job and even enrolled in a program to become an electrician. But the excitement of Hollywood stuck in his mind, especially after meeting stars like Clark Gable and Gregory Peck. Slowly, he started to wonder if acting could be his path. Steve made the decision to give acting a real shot. He started taking classes at the Pasadena Playhouse in 1946. To pay for it, he worked as a carpenter at the La Jolla Playhouse, where Gregory Peck noticed his hard work and gave him a small role in a play. That small chance made Steve realize how much he loved performing. Wanting to get better, he enrolled at UCLA to study theater in 1947. While he was older than most students, Steve didn't care. He acted in student productions, worked part-time, and learned everything he could about acting. By 1950, Steve was ready to graduate from UCLA, and his talent was already being noticed. In the summer of 1950, Steve Forrest was just 24 and working as a stagehand at the La Jolla Playhouse. He was fresh out of UCLA with a theater degree and still went by his real name, William Forrest Andrews. He had no idea his life was about to change forever. One day during rehearsals for the play Goodbye Again, Hollywood star Gregory Peck walked in. Peck noticed the tall, ruggedly handsome young man moving set pieces. Something about Forrest caught his attention. Peck walked over, started talking to him, and was impressed by Forrest's charm and passion for acting. Right then and there, Peck decided to cast him as a bellboy in the play, even though Forrest had no professional acting experience. That one role led to more opportunities at the Playhouse. Over the next 3 months, Forrest performed in 12 plays, learning everything he could about acting. Gregory Peck didn't just cast him, he mentored him. After rehearsals, Peck would stay behind to help Forrest work on his stage presence and confidence. Sometimes, he even invited Forrest to his home for dinner, where they talked about acting and life. Forrest later said that Peck didn't just give him a role, he gave him a career. By October 1950, Peck decided to take things a step further. He called his contacts at MGM and set up a screen test for Forrest. This wasn't just any screen test, it was a big deal. On October 17, 1950, Forrest arrived at MGM Studios, nervous but determined. The famous director George Cukor oversaw the test, and Forrest was asked to act out scenes from 5 different scripts. Watching from behind a two-way mirror were MGM's most important executives, including Dor Sherry. Forrest gave it his all, and halfway through, Sherry broke protocol and walked onto the set to congratulate him. This kind of praise from a studio head was almost unheard of. Forrest's performance was so good that MGM immediately offered him a contract. The deal was for 7 years, starting at $250 a week, with raises every 6 months. Years later, it was revealed that MGM had been in financial trouble at the time and wasn't signing new actors. Forrest's talent was so impressive that they made an exception, breaking their own rule. The contract even allowed him to continue studying at UCLA, which was rare for studio actors. Forrest's career began, but it wasn't easy. His older brother, Dana Andrews, was already a famous actor. People constantly compared the two, calling Forrest Dana Andrews' kid brother. Frustrated, Forrest legally changed his name to Steve Forrest in August 1951. The name change caused tension in the family, and Dana didn't speak to him for 6 months. Even with the new name, Forrest still struggled to step out of his brother's shadow. Many directors cast him in roles described as Dana Andrews types, which only added to his frustration. In 1954, things started to change when Forrest won the Golden Globe for New Star of the Year. He earned the award for his performance in So Big, a film based on Edna Ferber's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel. The win was a shock to everyone, including Forrest. He hadn't even planned to attend the ceremony, but his publicist insisted. When Forrest accepted the award, he made a surprising comment, thanking his brother Dana for showing me what not to do in Hollywood. This caused a stir and further strained their relationship. They reconciled weeks later, after a public meeting arranged by gossip columnist Luella Parsons. Winning the Golden Globe brought Forrest more attention, but it also created new challenges. The pressure to live up to the title of new star led him to make some poor career decisions. For example, he turned down the lead role in On the Waterfront, which later won Marlon Brando an Oscar. Forrest later admitted that he regretted the decision, but had felt unsure about taking on such a big role at the time. Throughout the 1950s, Hollywood's rigid typecasting system made things harder for Forrest. MGM executives decided he was too handsome to be a leading man, but not distinct enough to be a character actor. They often cast him as the other man, or a rival in romantic dramas. This frustrated Forrest, and he even walked off the set of The Decks Ran Red in 1957, after arguing with the director about being typecast again. Steve Forrest's career changed completely when he started working in television during the 1950s. Back then, Hollywood was not the same anymore. The studio system was falling apart, and television was becoming the big thing. Forrest realized this and decided to switch. On September 15, 1955, he appeared on TV for the first time in an episode of Lux Video Theater. Many film actors thought working in television was a step down, but Forrest didn't care. He saw the opportunity and made it work. His big moment came on November 3, 1956, when he starred in a Playhouse 90 episode called Forbidden Area. People loved how he could show real emotion, and this made him stand out. After that, Forrest's TV career took off. By 1958, he had acted in 17 different shows, like Climax and Zane Grey Theater. On April 12, 1959, he was in an episode of Goodyear Theater called The Last Town Car, and his performance was so good that he got an Emmy nomination. This made him a real star. But Forrest didn't stop making movies either. He kept working in both TV and film. which was rare at the time. By 1960, he was one of the most recognizable faces on television, showing up in a new episode every few weeks. Some of Forrest's most unforgettable roles were in Gunsmoke and The Twilight Zone. On October 8, 1966, he appeared in a Gunsmoke episode called The Whispering Tree. He played Cord Reckon, a man caught between loyalty and revenge. The role was so strong that he was invited back for 3 more episodes over the years. But the character everyone remembers is Will Mannon. In the 1969 episode Mannon, Forrest played a man who could outdraw Marshal Matt Dillon, the show's main hero. The episode was a massive hit, watched by over 22 million households. People loved Forrest's performance so much that he returned as Mannon 18 years later in the 1987 TV movie Gunsmoke: Return to Dodge. Forrest's role in The Twilight Zone was just as remarkable. On March 14, 1963, he starred in an episode called The Parallel. He played an astronaut named Major Robert Gaines, who comes back from space and realizes something is wrong with the world. Forrest had to act as 2 versions of the same character, one from this world and one from a parallel universe. His performance was full of suspense and mystery, which matched the show's vibe perfectly. Fans loved the episode, and it became one of the most memorable in the series' history. In 1965, Forrest made a surprising move. He and his family left the U.S. and went to England because he got the lead role in a British TV show called The Baron. This was a bold step for an American actor at the time. The show started on September 28, 1966, and was special because it was filmed entirely in color, which was rare in the UK then. Forrest played John Mannering, an antiques dealer who secretly worked as an agent for British intelligence. The producers changed the character to make him a Texan, giving him an American backstory to appeal to U.S. viewers. The show had a huge budget and was filmed in beautiful locations across Europe. The last episode aired on April 20th, 1967. Even though the show ended, Forrest's time in England showed that American actors could succeed in British television. Steve Forrest became Lieutenant Hondo Harrelson in a way that seemed almost like destiny. In early 1975, at 49 years old, Forrest was thinking about retiring from acting after struggling to find good roles. But everything changed on February 14, 1975. While having lunch at Musso and Frank Grill in Hollywood, he overheard a group talking about a new police drama series. He approached them out of curiosity and learned they were the show's producers. They noticed his commanding presence and invited him to audition. The audition was tough and very different from usual. Forrest had to climb a 20-foot wall, pretend to stop an attacker, and say difficult police terms at the same time. He was almost twice as old as the other actors trying out for the role, but his past as a soldier in World War II gave him an advantage. On March 3, 1975, he had one final test. He competed against 5 other actors in a fake hostage negotiation. The person playing the hostage-taker was actually a former S.W.A.T. officer. Forrest stayed calm and handled the situation like a real leader. This impressed the producers, and they gave him the role of Lieutenant Hondo Harrelson right away. Filming started just 2 weeks later, and Forrest's life changed forever. The show, S.W.A.T, first aired on February 17, 1975. No one thought it would become such a huge success. The first episode, called The Killing Ground, was watched by 28.5 million people. It broke records and became the most-watched premiere in ABC's history. Throughout its first season, the show averaged 21.3 million viewers each week, making it incredibly popular. Fans loved it so much that that merchandise like lunchboxes and action figures sold out everywhere. The Hondo action figure, released in August 1975, sold over 1 million units in just 1 month. Even the show's theme song, made by Barry DeVorzon, became a big hit. It reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in October 1975 and stayed there for 2 weeks. The show didn't just entertain people, it inspired real change. Many people wanted to join police SWAT teams after watching it. In 1976, the Los Angeles Police Department saw a 35% increase in applications to its SWAT unit. Applicants said the show made them want to join. This effect, called the Hondo effect, spread across the country. Some police departments even started using tactics they saw on the show. However, not everyone liked it. Some people said the show made police seem too violent and aggressive. A study in 1977 showed that fans of the show were more likely to support more funding for police and tougher tactics. This led to debates about the show's influence on society. Making the show was not easy. The actors went through hard training and worked long hours. Steve Forrest, who was 50 years old at the time, did many of his own stunts. This caused injuries. On August 12, 1975, he hurt himself jumping from a second-story window. He cracked 3 ribs and sprained his ankle. Even with these injuries, he came back to work the next day, wearing a corset under his uniform. Long hours caused tensions on set. Forrest and co-star Robert Urich had a big argument in November 1975 that shut down production for 2 days. Dangerous stunts also caused accidents. In March 1976, an explosion injured 3 crew members and destroyed expensive equipment. By the second season, many of the cast had been hospitalized because of injuries or exhaustion. Forrest even collapsed on set in January 1977, causing production to stop for 3 days. Forrest's famous catchphrase, "Let's roll," happened by accident. One day during filming in April 1975, loud construction noise kept ruining a scene. Frustrated, Forrest yelled, "Let's roll," to the team as they got into their SWAT van. The director liked it so much that he kept it in the show. Soon, it became Hondo's trademark phrase. Fans loved it, and by the 10th episode, it was used in every show. Years later, the phrase became famous again when Todd Beamer said it on United Flight 93 during the September 11, 2001, attacks. Forrest was humbled to learn that a line he improvised had such an impact. Despite its success, S.W.A.T. ended after just 2 seasons. Fans were shocked. The official reason was high production costs, but the truth came out much later. In 2015, declassified FBI documents revealed that J. Edgar Hoover worried the show was teaching criminals police tactics. A real robbery in 1976 used methods similar to those shown on the show. This made the FBI pressure ABC to cancel it. They even threatened the network's access to FBI resources. Steve Forrest was also anonymously threatened, which deeply unsettled him. In the end, producer Aaron Spelling decided to end the show, and ABC publicly blamed production costs. S.W.A.T. left a lasting legacy. It changed police dramas, inspired real law enforcement, and gave us a hero in Lieutenant Hondo Harrelson. When S.W.A.T. came out in February 1975, Steve Forrest's life changed completely. Before the show, he only got a few fan letters. After it aired, he started getting 2,500 letters every week. It was so much that his small office at home couldn't handle it. He had to hire 2 assistants just to keep up. On top of that, fans found out where he lived. Some even started showing up at his house uninvited, which caused problems for him and his family. Steve's family life was hit hard. His wife, Christine, said their 3 sons struggled with their dad's fame. The youngest son, Stephen, was bullied at school. Other kids said he acted stuck up because his dad was on TV. Forrest Jr., his middle son, started acting out and got frustrated because their family time kept getting interrupted. Steve's busy schedule and constant public appearances meant he wasn't around as much. Steve himself felt the pressure. He couldn't sleep, developed anxiety, and lost 23 pounds in just 3 months. He secretly went to therapy 3 times a week to deal with the stress, but didn't tell anyone, not even his co-stars. One day in June 1975, he had a panic attack while filming. The production stopped for 4 hours, and it cost the studio a lot of money. That moment made Steve realize he needed to find a way to balance his career and his personal life. Playing the tough Lieutenant Dan Hondo Harrelson on S.W.A.T. made Steve famous, but it also caused a big problem. After the show ended in 1976, he kept getting offers to play the same kind of action hero roles. From 1977 to 1980, he was offered 37 roles, but 34 of them were just like Hondo. Steve had trained as a serious actor and wanted to show his range, so he turned most of them down. This upset his agent and cost him a lot of money. By 1978, his income dropped by 68%. One rejection hurt Steve a lot. In 1979, he auditioned for a Broadway play, Death of a Salesman. He spent 6 months preparing and even gained 30 pounds to look more like the character. But the director didn't cast him, saying audiences wouldn't believe Hondo as the lead. This made Steve feel like he was trapped by his old role. In 1980, he shocked everyone by turning down $1.2 million for a role because it was another Hondo-type character. He explained, "I'd rather dig ditches than play the same role forever." During this time, Steve found something new that made him happy: beekeeping. At first, it was just a hobby to relax while filming S.W.A.T, but it quickly became his passion. By 1978, he had over 50 beehives in his backyard. He started selling honey under the name Hondo's Gold, and it even won first prize at the California State Fair. People were surprised to see him so excited about bees, but he loved it. In 1980, he even took a 6-month course at UC Davis to learn more about beekeeping. Steve got so into his bees that he turned down acting roles to focus on them. In 1981, he almost quit acting altogether after being invited to speak at a big beekeeping conference in Greece. He thought about retiring but decided to take one more acting job in Mommy Dearest. This role was risky because it was based on a controversial story about Joan Crawford. The filming was tough, and Steve even got hurt during one scene. The movie didn't do well, and Steve regretted taking the role. After that, he stepped away from films for a while. In 1986, Steve made a big return to TV with a role in Dallas. His character was mysterious and brought back a lot of excitement. This helped Steve reconnect with fans and rebuild his career. Even though his journey was full of ups and downs, Steve stayed true to himself. He refused to be boxed into one type of role and always followed his passions, whether it was acting or beekeeping. His story shows how determined and resilient he was, even when things got tough. Steve Forrest married his college sweetheart, Christine Carrillis, on December 23, 1948. They stayed happily married for 65 years until Steve's death in 2013. Their love story started at UCLA in 1946, when Steve was studying theater arts after World War II. Every morning before class, he left wildflowers on Christine's doorstep, a small but sweet gesture that became part of their family's story. Their marriage stood out in Hollywood, where relationships often fall apart. In the early years, life wasn't easy. Steve worked as a carpenter and prop boy to support them, while Christine worked multiple jobs to help with his acting dreams. In 1966, Steve's career brought a big change. He moved the family to England for his role in The Baron. Many couples might have struggled with such a big move, but for Steve and Christine, it became an adventure. Christine embraced life as an expat and even got involved in local charity work. People on the set started calling her the Baron's Lady. Steve later said their strong bond came from a promise they made early on, to never go to bed angry and to always make time for each other. They kept this promise with weekly date nights, even during Steve's busiest years, like when he was filming S.W.A.T. in the 1970s. Their marriage became an inspiration to younger actors who often asked for their advice. Steve wasn't just a dedicated husband, he was a devoted father too. He had 3 sons, Michael, Forrest, and Stephen, born between 1949 and 1955. Even with his demanding Hollywood schedule, Steve made sure he was present in their lives. He had a strict rule that he would never be away from home for more than 2 weeks. Sometimes this meant taking expensive flights back and forth. Once, while filming The Longest Day in France, he chartered a private plane just to see Michael's school play and flew back right after. Steve was also deeply involved in charity, though he never talked much about it. While filming The Longest Day in France, he volunteered at an orphanage, which inspired him to do more. In 1965, he and Christine started the Forrest Foundation to help underprivileged kids in Los Angeles. They opened the Forrest Learning Center in 1967, offering tutoring, meals, and a safe place for kids. By 1975, there were 3 centers helping over 500 children daily. Steve also funded a school in Guatemala after seeing the need during a film shoot. He visited it every year, bringing supplies and teaching English. Steve supported many other causes too. In 1978, inspired by his role in S.W.A.T, he created a scholarship for children of fallen police officers. Over 200 students have gone to college because of it. He also cared about the environment. In 1980, he bought 1,000 acres of rainforest in Costa Rica and turned it into a wildlife sanctuary. For veterans, Steve co-founded Actors for Veterans in 1985 to help them find jobs in Hollywood. Several veterans, including R. Lee Ermey, started their careers through this program.